into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Holy shit. Welcome to Poddamn America, the Gothic Socialist Podcast, the bane of Reddit. Greetings, the motherfucking damned. It's Jake Flores. That's Alex Patak.
No mods, no masters.
And a special guest from What a Time to Be Alive, Kath Barbadoro. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you guys?
Oh, good. I'm
Oh,
sweating.
God, how am I?
It is pretty sweaty in here.
Yeah, it sucks.
It's all right. It's just summertime.
Update about Jake's house. It sucks.
It fucking
No
sucks.
one bought the clown car.
The clown car's still here.
Wait, it was for sale? How much were you asking for
I do
it?
feel like we shouldn't talk about this anymore since we did fill
okay,
around
sorry.
40 minutes of just for someone buy our clown car.
Oh, I'm about to make a sale, dude. Kath's going to buy the clown car.
It's pretty cool. I don't really have room for it. I
Kath,
think
you
my
can't
roommates would be
afford
upset.
not to buy this clown car.
The defining feature of it is that it's small.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
You can fit a bunch of other stuff
It took-
inside of it more than would fit in a regular space.
It is. It's a TARDIS. It's like a TARDIS.
Think of
clown
how
cars
long
are.
it took you to get here. And how
It really
fast
did.
you could get home with so many of your friends.
Just
clown
racing
car-
across Brooklyn.
The clown car has a mirror on it that is as big as the car itself.
Oh, that's for cocaine, baby.
Honk, honk.
For crazy,
get it to
twisted
Anders.
clowns.
Come on.
We should. Anders, our autistic
Yeah.
clown.
Him and his girlfriend can go cruising.
We mentioned this off mic, but I just want our fans to hold this to us. Next live show he's on, he has to wear clown makeup.
Yes,
Yeah.
We have
dude.
to make him a scary goth clown.
It's
September
really
debates.
offensive that he hasn't worn clown makeup at any performance that I have been aware of.
And he calls himself a clown.
He calls himself a
And
clown.
he
has
calls himself a clown.
he has the gall to tell the world he's a clown.
Yeah. He's stealing their valor, you know?
Well, I love Anders, but I'm glad he is in Europe right now because I got to do the Dem debate with you guys.
Yeah,
And we had a
eat
lot of
shit,
fun.
Anders.
That was fun as shit.
Did you record that?
We did.
Did you put it out?
We put out like the first part.
The
The
first
fir-
20
with
minutes.
us realizing that no one was there because
Yeah.
of the podcast, and they
Yeah.
were just there.
We didn't put out the full 3 hours of other people talking and then us being like, he looks like a boy.
I
Getting
figured.
slowly more and more drunk.
More and more
until-
drunk. At one point, I dropped my phone off the stage. So drunk, I got on hard seltzers. It was a good time.
There's a big debate about when it was okay to pee because the show just kept going. And I was like, I don't have to pee. And then hour 3, I had like 8 White Claws.
Yeah.
Look, we work hard.
Yeah.
We work hard for people.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the regular show now.
I know.
Because
I'm
you
glad
were
to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, of course, of course. We should get right into the most pressing topic of the week. I know this is kind of a downer, and I don't want to get too serious, but I have 30 to 50 feral hogs that have been harassing me.
They've been harassing you.
I don't know.
What about your children?
They've been cyberbullying me.
I just
and
psychologically overlapped them with Reddit or something in my head.
every 3 to 5 minutes, 30 to 50 wild hogs invade my apartment.
Yeah.
The timestamp on it is the most devastating part. That you could get that volume of hogs so
right.
fast.
So quick.
I heard a theory
It's like a tap opening.
that the guy who put out this tweet and then like made it go viral, you know, maybe more on purpose than we think, is a white supremacist because 30 to 50 feral hogs.
Yep.
3 to 5 minutes. If you add all those numbers up, it equals 88. The Hitler
wow.
thing.
He
Wow.
has to be consistent with his white supremacist numerology, even when complaining about his feral hogs. It's very important.
It's like, yeah. What? So maybe he's trying to acquire some sort of firearm to use for something else, but via
I would love
Twitter.
to see just like the head of the Klan decode this in his chapel he has.
I did see somebody on Twitter. I didn't click it because you'll understand when I tell you what it was. But there was some thread that was like, okay, y'all, buckle up. Here's my thread about the history of feral hogs. And I was like, no, absolutely not.
No, I'm not buckling up.
I refuse to buckle up for this.
Getting out of this vehicle. It's unsafe at any speed.
There's hogs everywhere.
But yeah, I feel like I was. This couldn't have happened at a worse time because if they're like. I work, the podcast I do, What a Time to Be Alive, is like chock full of hog content. That is like
It's a hog podcast.
It is
It's
a
a
hogcast. It is. Like, Wrestlesplania was also a hogcast when I did that, just a different kind of hog. But What a Time to Be Alive is,
It's just like a wide penis.
yeah, we talked about dicks a lot on that show.
Hello.
But
Young listeners, beware.
But like all we do, anytime an animal gets loose, like it is on our show. Anytime there's anything relating to a pig or a hog of any kind, it is on our show. And it happened, 30 to 50 Wild Hogs happened like 12 hours after we recorded this week's episode. So you guys are getting a scoop.
This is a scoop.
Congrats.
And yet I feel the same.
Yeah.
You're empty inside.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we got to this topic definitely first before the rest of the internet
Yeah.
completely
A real
beat
scoop.
it to death.
To the point where we're recording now and I'm like, I don't think this is fun anymore.
I'm done with this.
There's this weird, like, vague ennui you get when stuff goes viral like that, where you can feel it, like, losing flavor like a stick of gum, like, while
Yeah.
it's happening, and you're just like, feral hogs, yes, feral hogs. Feral hogs. Feral hogs.
Feral, what-
I hate feral hogs.
Shut the fuck up about the feral hogs.
When am I going to make enough money to have my own feral hogs?
It's like you need more and more viral content. to
Need
get the
more and
same
more
high.
hogs to
More-
get the same rush.
30
60 to
50
80 next time.
Won't cut it anymore.
It's got to be like Princess Mononoke in your backyard every day.
I like the idea of the white supremacist thing being that, like, they're like, you know, they're somehow pleased about this. Like, I fucking nailed it. I subliminally got this number out there in a way that no one reading it understands.
Clam,
So-
look at this. Squee, clam.
Which is, I guess it's funny because they do that shit all the time. Like, alt-right people do that weird, like, OK symbol and
I
stuff.
hate that they ruined the OK symbol.
But
I
you're
know, it
like,
was a good symbol. I still use that emoji.
Yeah.
It's a good emoji.
It reminds me of Italians.
if it's
yeah.
the pizza
They're
box guy.
Because it's
they're
okay
appropriating my culture,
To
really.
have pizza.
Oh, Papa, no.
I also find the white supremacist number thing very confusing because I was born in 1988, as were
Suspicious.
yeah, right. As were, you know, like when I was in school, like everyone in my like year was born in 1988. So like everybody's AIM screen names and everything were they have 88 in them.
It's a bunch
Okay.
of, like,
Yeah.
the little X's and shit. Emo X's.
Oh,
and
for
then-
sure, yeah. Like all the like scene hardcore kids and stuff, and
Yeah.
then just 88 at the end. Suspicious shit.
You guys are all going to get deplatformed off of AOL.
Also, I'm
By
sure
people born in
at some
1987.
point, like, because when I was 14, that was like the height of AIM shit.
Yeah.
So like, there are definitely people who had 1488 in their screen names, no question.
Oh, man.
Oh,
It's a problem.
Yeah. I guess the other thing about it is that, like, if you're trying to disseminate this information into the world, why are you doing it, like, via clues? You know?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Because
Those wacky
it
Nazis.
interrogates the white mind.
yeah.
They can't help but solve a clue. That's what Scooby-Doo was about.
White
It's
people
the white people be like, but of mysteries.
naturally inquisitive.
They gotta
white
solve
people.
them. They can't leave well enough alone.
Always meddling.
They always gotta invite their dog out.
That is white people love to meddle in other people's business and bring their dog places where it shouldn't be.
Who owns this house? Who owns this house? I was driving by and it looks suspicious.
Oh, yeah. I never thought about that. They are like those people. They're just trying to find a bar they can bring that fucking dog into the entire show, making a big deal out of it.
With their fucking art van. It's just like, ugh.
We're having the big dog meet the smaller dog.
Yeah, and they've got
The smaller dog wants to fight all the other dogs. And I'm like, he's fine.
He's fine.
they've got Shaggy, who's a crusty, and Velma, who's like really humorlessly political, and
yeah.
I guess Daphne and Fred are just hipsters.
Daphne's a thought.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
You're not afraid.
Anyways, feral hogs aside, I guess we'll get into the main thing today.
Lock those piggies up.
Lock them up.
Lock the pigs. I had a hot take on a lot of what's going on in the
Really?
world today.
That should be how we start every podcast.
Really?
I kind of think about this every time there's a mass shooting, and I think I'm right about it, but I'm open to argue about it. People do get super pissed off about it, but I thought, well, maybe, rather than just kind of endlessly yelling into Twitter, let's make a thing, right? That's why we make this podcast.
Community building.
Yeah.
There's something
So you
that
can yell
happens.
at your friends in person instead.
I'm posing an argument here, I guess.
Okay, everyone
which
shut up.
is that whenever there's a mass shooting, right, because of the specific dynamics of like Republicans and Democrats versus each other in this country, there's this thing that happens where Republicans say this is entirely a mental health issue. And for that week, they care about mental health, a thing that they never care about
No.
outside of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they say that to distract from the gun issue. It's not guns, it's mental health, when it's obviously like this big complex system of things. It's probably mentally unhealthy people that have access to guns. You need to fix
Sure.
both of those, right? But it causes people, I think, who are like reacting to Republicans suddenly really liking the mental health industry to go, fuck you, these people, did this of their own free will. It's all these other things. It's society. It's toxic masculinity, but it's not mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of bothers me because I think, like, porque no los dos. Like,
Porque no los dos.
it's a lot of these things intersecting with each other.
Right.
And also, it's a really weird stance to be like a leftist or a liberal or whatever and be like, really, really anti the mental health industry because that's our shit.
Right. Like it's the one time where leftists will discount these sort of institutional factors that put people in the positions that they are.
Yeah.
Like where it's like, no, this person did this of their own free will, all of their volition. They completely made this choice independently of all contextual factors, which is like the opposite of everything that like leftist ideology teaches us, right? Is that
Right.
people don't make choices completely in a vacuum.
It's a really it's not our shit. It's not a good left take, I think,
it's
to
not a
be
good
that
look,
reductive.
Chief.
Exactly.
Somebody sent me this meme about this that I thought was well put. Sorry, I just said that sentence, but it's but it's like an annoying looking guy on a laptop, and then it says,
Oh man, that meme has so many words on it.
Yeah, wow.
It's
You
a
are
bad
getting
meme.
older.
a Zoomer sent me this.
A Zoomer sent you this? Oh,
Yeah.
shout out to
My
the Zoomers.
grandson sent me a meme.
It's it puts it pretty well. It says, "Look, it's a person going, my mental illness that is specific to me has never made me violent. Therefore, mental illness has nothing to do with this. It's not like a huge mental illness epidemic and white supremacy can work in tandem to create these horrible individuals. Nope, everything has one cause and nothing is complex." It's obviously a sarcastic meme, right?
Which you can tell if you can see it
Yeah, you can see the guy
from the font and picture choice.
scowling with he still has like the stock photo watermark over him. This is a poorly constructed
I'm
meme.
sending it to my son right now.
But yeah, I think bad argument. Oh fuck you, it's one thing, it's not the other, right? It's
Yeah.
obviously like this big, huge fucking problem with alienation and just weird, shitty young men having nowhere to like put all this anxiety and stuff,
Yeah.
and then like getting sucked into whatever fucking thing, and then going down weird rabbit holes and having undiagnosed mental
Sure.
illness and all this stuff and yada yada yada.
The fact that everyone feels completely alone and violent all the time has nothing to do with our violent rampages that
Right.
happen every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like people get weird about that because like obviously the most practical thing is access to guns. Like that is like the most sort
Sure.
of concrete
It is a great
thing.
place to start.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
give you
yeah.
that.
But like, yeah, I mean, like white supremacist ideology is very attractive when you are alienated and angry all the time.
Yeah, and those two
have
things
nowhere to put it.
those two things catalyze each other, is what
Completely,
I'm saying. Right?
yeah.
And also, like, I think also talking about it in this way and assuming that if someone is addressing the mental illness thing, oh, they must be anti the gun thing. Well, that's fucking reductive. But it's
Right.
also like, I don't know. I don't invoke my half of a bachelor's degree very often. But I did learn like a couple of things when I was studying psychology as a young man, and one of them was to be skeptical and to understand that mental illness is like a soft science and it's not like really easily defined as fucking one thing. So a lot of people seem to be under the impression that, like, you know,
That's a wide umbrella.
90% of
It's a big tent.
it's a big party.
It's the DSA of being fucked up.
Exactly.
A lot of people seem to be like of the opinion that, like, you know, it's a bad thing to sort of paint, you know, mentally ill people as being violent. But like some of them are. Everyone is mentally ill. Like everyone suffers from some degree of mental illness. Just most of it's like a small degree. And then for a lot of people, it's like a fucking hardcore thing. So like
The Beastie Boys, speaking of 1988, had a license to ill.
oh, we're gonna get there.
Do you like how my tone was like I was going to say something informative, but then it was bullshit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
What was I gonna say? Fucking.
I had a lateral point to make.
Is it about the Beastie Boys?
No. It is about. It's related to the topic, and it could be like its whole own episode. But it's just a take you see every time there's a mass shooting, which is every 2 days. Where, you know, you have the same debate between Republicans and Democrats of, are we going to ban guns? Are we going to look into mental health for America? Are we going to look into general health for America? And then you have the most fringe lefty people online who are like, hardcore Dan says, by the way, why don't we give everyone an assault rifle right now? That will fix all of the problems.
Yeah.
And I understand from a power perspective the fact that lower classes of society have no power and are kind of kept under a boot. But if you just gave communities in America like AK-47s, it would be fucking nuts. No one's like in a community anymore. It's just everyone has a gun now.
Yeah. I kind of think that like guns is one of the issues that like no one really has it completely right. It every time this happens, just a million insane takes go off in every different direction from all sorts of people that I usually feel are pretty consistent. But
I think it's the same sort of problem as like with the mental health stuff is like, because if you're calling for gun control, then it's like, well, you're like, you're not understanding the way that gun rights operate in the United States, which are that only white people are legally allowed to have them.
Yeah,
and if people of color have them, they get shot. Like stuff like that. Like there's all of these complicated things. There's also like people in rural areas that hunt, and also like it's very scary if the only people who have guns are people employed by the government and no one else can defend themselves. That's like the whole reason we had a revolution in the first place.
My
So
erstwhile associate, Killer Mike, he often makes this point.
Exactly.
He often says, hello, the first people they'll take the guns from are the black people, and it's going to be some bullshit. I'm Killer Michael, hello.
I agree, Killer Michael.
I have a few bars I'd like to share with y'all.
But yeah, I think people are very quick to accuse people who disagree with them of not considering the whole picture, when in reality it's very complicated and there's lots of issues. And I don't know, personally, I still think that like it would be okay for us to have it be way harder to get a gun. I'm cool with that.
It would be a great offer on the table to start the conversation if we reduce the availability of guns while getting rid of the guns the police have.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about that?
Great.
Totally.
Love it.
How about that?
Anyway.
Yeah, all of this, like, I agree with all that stuff. That being said, I think it's a bit of a Gordian knot. It's like
Yeah.
you can look at it from every different direction and go, I don't fucking know. And then I'm not some guy with a podcast going to solve this, right?
I think you can do it.
but
You have a clown car.
No, I think what we've determined is that we all have exactly the right idea about what to do about guns.
We're
I
gonna
have a
fix it.
minor
And we're
in
gonna-
game design, and
I've
we would
been-
often tackle problems like these.
I've been on the guns Wikipedia page all night, and I think I figured it out.
I learned that AR does not stand for automatic rifle. Thank you very much.
But it also doesn't stand for all right. Because it's not.
You know what I like to imagine is Tommy Loren going, "These are actually AR rifles," and then someone going, "Are they?"
Hey.
Remember,
Yeah.
like that
Hey.
movie Rushmore? All right. So I wanted to kind of make this point and reiterate that, like, you know, mental health is totally a left issue. We're anti-capitalism, all this stuff.
It's a healthcare issue.
And
That's
also,
our whole thing.
like, the violence thing. When you go to I'm in therapy right now. The first thing they ask me is, have you had violent thoughts? And I went, no. And they were like, cool. And then the person threw a form in the trash that they would have otherwise had to probably fill out. And then there's a system in place for this. Violence can be like the end of mental illness. It's a thing that happens. But we'll get to that. So what I wanted to do was go through the story of
Paul Revere.
this. He was fucking crazy and he needs to be stopped.
He's a maniac, riding through town on that horse, terrorizing everyone.
I need you to do 1 candle if they're by land and then 2 if it's by boats. It's just a thing I need.
Paul, get off the horse.
He had
Paul.
OCD. But for candles.
So I wanted to talk about Reagan's sort of war on mental health services and institutions and things like that. But before we even get to Reagan, we have to sort of start with like the system that he eventually dismantled. So in the 1950s, California led the country in moving patients from hospitals into like group homes, assisted living, that sort of thing, halfway houses. There were like these. There was a movement like that was very, pro like secondary care after you get out of the hospital, right? But in
So I'm sorry. This is like, as opposed to just keeping people in asylums for like their whole life. They were trying to move them into more like transitional stuff.
yeah, well, as opposed to being discharged like kind of onto the street or
Got it,
into a
okay.
worse for-profit, what's called board and care homes, which we'll get to in a little bit.
That's how it was in the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is in California, right? And so California is also important to note that like this is where Reagan and Nixon started their political careers, and this is also like amidst the they came out of the tail end of like the McCarthy era and
Yeah.
stuff, and so they both associated just psychiatry in general with communism. They just straight
Nice.
up didn't believe in it. It was fucking hocus pocus hook'em, right? And so there's this sort of burgeoning like mental health industry, and there's a movement that sort of lasts through the 70s. Especially in the rest of the country. But in 1967, Reagan becomes governor, and he pretty much just starts immediately putting a stop to all of the the post-hospital care.
The Gipper's here, and he's going to shut down your breathing machine. How's that sound?
It's not bad.
Do it for the Gipper.
Yeah. This is referred to as deinstitutionalization.
Wait. Did you say something earlier that there's a stigmatization of mentally unwell people being communists?
Of psychiatry being
Of psychiatry being
The
communist.
practice
Okay.
of psychiatry, right?
So the
talking about your feelings is a communist plot.
the initiative here.
Compromat.
Yeah, I mean it is, but the initiative here is Reagan gets into office and is like, we're getting rid of all the communists, talking to people's feelings.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, I think part of that is that it's like state-funded healthcare, and
Well, yeah, that's like a big. It's a like centrally funded, planned health program for people who are like too non-functional to be able to treat themselves.
Sure.
yeah, but it's both actually. So it's interesting because it's that, and then it's also, as we'll get to a little bit into this story, Reagan also just like it's kind of like I think he probably just circled this all in one big thought. Is he doesn't believe in the institution of psychiatry. And he also, because he doesn't believe in it, just doesn't believe mental illness is a real thing. He's also a Republican, pull yourself up by your bootstraps guy.
If you have a problem, talk to the chimp you own as a pet in several of your films.
Yeah. And the ultimate irony is that he's losing his mind during his
I know.
His brain is melting while all this is going on.
That is an Italian man doing a kiss of the fingers and making a symbol that means white power.
So, when Reagan takes office and becomes the governor of California, the first thing he sort of does is abolish involuntary hospitalization. And that's like a really important part of the story, is that suddenly you can no longer commit like someone else to a hospital who is out of their fucking mind in order to help them.
Right.
And they won't commit themselves.
Which, as a comedian, has happened to all of our friends.
Yeah. And they need it.
Yeah, I understand why some people are very skeptical of that, and also that like there's a history of a lot of exploitation in a lot of like mental health institutions in history. That said, I know many people who have been committed, and all of them were like, I am so glad I had to be committed then.
It's such a weird dynamic of like, first of all, I am never going back.
Right.
And second of all, thank God I went.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a friend who I can't believe is still alive due to the entire way he treats his body, but one Christmas a few years ago was just live Facebooking his arrest at the hands of the mental health police. He's like, they want my phone. I'll find whoever did this. I'll find it. Like in Facebook statuses, every 5-minute updates. Oh.
The mental health police?
Yeah,
Who was-
well, it turned out his sister ratted him out and sent goons to his house.
Well,
but-
that's the other thing
yeah.
is like it really depends. Like the problem with like involuntary committal and stuff like that is like you can't call the cops on a mentally ill person because
Yeah.
like that's how people get shot. Like
Right.
that it's very fraught. Like
But
the whole thing.
You
is,
have those men with the big forearms and the white coats who show up and strap you to a table.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they tie a
Mr.
belt
Clean
around your
comes and
forehead.
takes you away.
They do be looking like Mr. Clean. That's a good point.
Yeah. That's like, he sanitizes your bathroom.
Yeah, it's a very clean table.
So anyway, there's something important in these two things happening at the same time. So Reagan is very into deinstitutionalization and abolishing the ability to commit someone. This causes a huge purge of mentally ill patients from psychiatric hospitals. And now no one can get them back in. So he creates this crazy fucking like purge situation.
Yeah, it's like the purge.
It's
That's also what
literally
I
like
thought.
the purge.
The entire time I was reading about this, it's like I don't really know where to place it. It's like one of those movies where New York is just run amok with like zombies or something like that.
It's like an escape from New York style situation, but for the state of California.
Yeah. And so he did all this. This is really interesting because this is all happening in San Jose. Or a lot of this is happening in California, specifically in San Jose, before it happens nationally. So this is kind of like canary in the coal mine stuff, right?
They're
This is when
seeing how
he's governor, and then he enacts the same policies once he's president.
Yeah.
Right.
They're
So-
seeing how the purge goes first.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
the first purge.
It's the pilot.
The one
The
that
purge
takes place
pilot.
on Staten Island.
I feel like a purge on Staten Island wouldn't really work because everyone who lives on Staten Island is a cop.
Right. Well, you'd think so, but there's a whole movie about it.
The first purge is actually really good, and
I've heard they're good.
it does kind of factor in. I won't give away the first purge, but watch
Don't
it.
give away the first purge.
Please don't.
But the criminals are the heroes, which is fucking tight. Anyway, so in San Jose, there's a hospital called Agnew State Hospital, which is one of the first hospitals to purge a shit ton of people. They discharge. I keep saying purge.
You're like
Well, they
Elizabeth
did,
Warren
though.
saying suck.
Yeah, I
at
can't
that-
stop saying it. They purge. It's like the movie The Purge. What if she just started saying that during the debates?
Our healthcare is like the purge.
Just can't stop comparing everything to the purge.
That's like an Onion headline or something.
I have a plan for a purge.
Oh yeah.
Under my plan, all crime is legal, but only for one day.
Oh yeah.
And there's just like a bunch of people who work at BuzzFeed behind her being like, that's right.
Yep, correct.
That's a good plan.
So Agnew State Hospital discharges 1,800 patients, and there's a college nearby. And someone from the college reported to a local paper. They quoted it as being a, quote, mass invasion of mental patients. Okay, I couldn't read my own handwriting.
This is almost the plot of all those 80s horror movies too, right?
Well, it kind of is, and it's like those-
Contemporaneous
It's like
with
based
that.
on a real thing.
yeah.
Halloween is based on a real thing.
So they have this, this just immediate homeless problem, and obviously this eventually leads to homelessness. But there's these things called board and care centers that crop up, which are for profit, and they
I just very gingerly stepped on Alex's foot.
Yeah, like way out of the way. Like 3 feet away.
Sorry. And then I said sorry into the microphone, so I thought I should probably address it. Anyway.
Oh, I thought you were saying sorry for going, I was like, you can say,
Thank you.
Okay, so they're for-profit health centers.
Right, and so this is different from the state-run sort of centers that we were talking about at the beginning of this, like the halfway houses and stuff like that.
And the way for-profit prisons are different.
Right, so there's an incentivization that happens here, right?
I think like probably a good comparison is like for-profit rehab centers.
Yeah, exactly. So things happen in these nursing homes that are like they're getting paid by the head of people that they have in them instead of people that they like fix and put back into society.
No.
And so there's all this corruption shit that starts happening where like nursing homes they start bidding on the most easily managed patients. They just like raffle them off and shit.
Oh man, everybody's going for those fucking comatose Alzheimer's old people.
Yeah.
They're so chill.
That's just to earn money sleeping. It's
Got 75 for depression.
Yeah, get all the depressed ones.
Sad man over here. Sad man, $75.
There's nursing homes that pay bounties of $100 to psychiatrists for like just to give me your easiest mental patient or whatever. There's also like crazy shit that starts happening where like because people are profiting off of in a not very well incentivized way, just like having a place that keeps mental patients there after they're discharged from the hospital. There's like a building that's just like a 10 by 10 foot room with like a bucket for people to shit in that they find, where there's just like 3 mentally ill people living in it, and there's like dogs chained up outside of it. All this crazy shit starts happening, right?
It's like there's no, when you deregulate all that stuff, like the standard of care can be as varied as possible. Like there's no standard of like protocol or anything.
Yeah.
And then like if you get some sort of partnership with like a private medical practice or even like some kind of government contract to take these people off your hands, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. This mental ward is sponsored by Bonsai Buddy. Everybody find a cell and dial up gorilla style.
It's funny because like Reagan era Republicans specifically always talk about people like gaming the welfare state and all this shit, but that's like, this is kind of what's happening. It's the people, the bosses are gaming, whatever money they can sort of.
Can I do a brief plug?
Do it.
We did my other podcast, Lie, Cheat, and Steal. We did a whole episode about the original welfare queen, like the original story that
the Queen
Reagan like ran on, like of this woman, fur coats, blah blah blah. It's a really interesting story, very complicated. Also, she was white. Twist.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but anyway, she was just like a crazy con woman, and we did a whole thing about it. Look at the Lie, Cheat, and Steal Twitter feed. Anyway,
that podcast rules. You guys should listen to it.
hey,
So
thanks.
it's a similar situation to like the woman who had the McDonald's coffee burn, where it becomes a media outrage.
Right, and then you're like, oh, actually,
based on actually a very understandable and severe situation.
Yeah.
She became a meme back
It
in the
became
day.
a meme. Make your coffee the right temperature.
Come on, McDonald's.
Come on.
Do better.
It's too hot.
So-
You burnt my pussy off.
That's what happened to her.
In Long Beach, in Long Island, something similar is happening. Those are like the 2 big sites where it happens before it goes national. In Long Beach, they said that the hotels and motels were just filled with mental patients that had been discharged. So, like, you go to a weird seaside hotel and they're just like, welcome to Hotel Insanity.
You check in before we check you out.
Yeah. There's a church in Long Island that complained that people just started showing up to the church because it's a place you can just public, you can just walk in. So they just started having these crazy people that would just wander in, and apparently
They're called Catholics, folks.
clown
Catholics.
car. At Mass, someone was found urinating on the floor and eating the altar flowers.
Hell
which
yeah.
fucking rules.
That's
One
just
thing
some
in a
sick-
church you can't eat.
That's just some sick performance art going on. That's what that is.
Yeah.
If Jesus can be the bread, why can't he be the flowers? I'm sorry. You're
Yeah.
going to put rules on this now?
So something happened in Long Island that's interesting. That's sort of like a third factor in this whole thing.
Yeah. Where does the bagel boss come in?
Oh, he's perfectly sane, baby. He's the most logical
He's too
person.
sane.
He's the most.
gotta
That's
lock
his
him up.
problem.
Yeah.
He's too sane.
Yeah.
He's the only one who knows these things about women.
In a world full of jokers. So something happens, which is that the Long Beach City Council ordinance, Long Beach City Council creates an ordinance because this is happening, because there's just crazy people wandering this beach town, wreaking havoc on everything and freaking everyone out. They write this law to where, like, to live in Long Beach, essentially, you have to take your medicine, like, by law, which is like,
That's wild.
it's hard. I don't know how it would be enforced, you know.
Yeah.
But it's an insane law, right? So the Long Beach.
Billy Joel comes to your house. Oh, I'm thinking of Long Island still. God damn it.
No, Long Beach is on Long Island.
Oh, okay.
Wait,
yeah.
I thought it was in California. Isn't this happening in California?
I think there's
Long
no.
Beach?
Sorry, there's 2 Long Beaches, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, so
But
this
isn't
is
it-
in Long Island.
This one is in New York.
So Billy Joel does come to your house.
This
Okay,
one
so
is in
Billy
Long
Joel
Island.
does come to your house.
Yeah, Billy Joel.
Okay.
Yes, Billy Joel does come to your house and make you take your medicine. So the New York Civil Liberties Union declares this law unconstitutional. So that's where another like factor kind of comes into this that continues throughout all of these clashes. Is
Yeah.
that a lot of like honestly right-wing people start invoking like constitutional rights and saying that you
Right.
can't commit someone. They have the right to shit in their fucking hand and run
like
around.
sovereign
And,
citizen shit.
Right.
Yeah.
They're an autonomous person. You can't, if they haven't committed a crime, you can't like detain them.
You can't
basically.
commit the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of blurry, it's like a interesting argument, but it's invoked in a lot of ways very cynically, just as a way to like keep, just win whatever the fucking side of the argument you want to. In California, eventually the prison population starts to boom, right? And obviously this is because all these people became homeless, and then from there it's just illegal to be homeless, and you got crazy people running around. Eventually, eventually they're going to be arrested for something. It said that 41% of patients during this time were reported to have been arrested. So like people that come back into the mental hospitals have been in jail. Obviously, big fucking loop, right? A California prison psychiatrist is quoted as saying, "I'm literally drowning in patients," like a millennial. He's the first millennial.
Humble brag.
San Jose prison creates the first mental illness unit. And then,
What year are we at? Do you know?
this is in like the 70s.
Okay.
California was the 70s, and then everywhere else was the 80s, right?
Yeah, because what happens is, so Jimmy Carter, at the end of his presidency, when he thinks he's going to be reelected, he writes this bill. I can't remember the name of it. I'll look it up in a second.
Called
But
the Purge.
it's a bill that essentially the concept of it is to create a bunch of federal funding for these actual mental health institutes. But he loses by a shit ton to Ronald Reagan in 1980. Like
Right.
the first thing Reagan does is start waging a war on psychiatry, and he deinstitutionalizes the entire country.
All the worst presidents are so funny. It's really hard to take seriously.
Dude, they're all so fun. Like just waging a war against mental institutions is like
It's a very of course it was the president that was a fucking LA actor. None of those people believe in fucking psychiatry.
right.
Well, it's a Scientology tenet too.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Was Reagan a Scientologist?
No, but he arose from the
Right.
same cultural milieu as Scientology. you
Yeah,
know?
because L. Ron Hubbard was like around Hollywood at that time, hobnobbing with all those fucking weirdo people that are
All
all
those
connected,
weirdos, yeah.
like the rocket scientist guy and shit. Anyways, so in the 70s, suddenly there's an uptick at least of public high profile murders, and the thing that they all have in common is that the person is always diagnosed with schizophrenia,
Right.
but not institutionalized, right? So in 1970, John Fraser, responding to the voice of God, killed a prominent surgeon and his wife, 2 young sons, and a secretary. Fraser's mother and wife had sought unsuccessfully to have him hospitalized. In 1972, Herbert Mullen, responding to auditory hallucinations, killed 13 people over 3 months. He had been hospitalized 3 times but released without further treatment. In 1973, Charles Soper killed his wife, 3 children, and himself 2 weeks after having been discharged from a state hospital. This one's interesting. 1973 serial killer Edmund Kemper killed his mother and her friend and was charged with killing 6 others. But 8 years earlier, he had killed his grandparents and but just been released when he turned 21.
It's crazy to imagine getting away with that many murders now when we live in the surveillance state, you know? Like, one of those happened over 3 months.
Yeah, well,
They get you walking out the door.
I don't, like, this is just fucking spitballing, but, like, maybe that's why there's so many mass shootings right now and not, you know, old school serial killers running around.
Yeah, or like extended spree killers. Like that doesn't really happen. I just watched the assassination of Gianni Versace, the American Crime Story thing, which is
Cool.
about it's about this guy Andrew Cunanan who killed Versace. But before he killed Versace, he killed like 5 or 6 people and was a fugitive and was like going across the country killing people. And like I feel like now that's a lot harder to do because of like GPS in your phone and like shit like that, you know?
Yeah, they can tell from the last time you played Candy Crush how many people you will kill tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah. Millennials, man, they don't even know, you know? Why do serial killers look like this
So
and not
hard
this?
to,
It's a picture
so
of Marilyn
hard to
Monroe.
spree kill these days. These kids
You
just don't
simply
get it.
can't.
Goddamn youths. So Edmund Kemper was like a well-known serial killer. There's a really good classic Last Podcast on the Left episode about him.
He was also in. He was the best part of that Mindhunter show.
Right, he was on Mindhunter.
Yeah.
Yeah. He also he eventually ended up in prison, in state prison in California, and he apparently became like a model prisoner while he was in there, and
He became a model.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
He became a model.
He's really
They won't
weird
arrest
looking,
you
too.
if you're hot. Yeah.
Well, he had a big old
That's
ass.
the one way out. Yeah,
He was
had a
thick
thick
as
ass.
fuck.
Yeah.
He was like a big, huge,
Yeah,
lumbering.
a giant
He'd
dude,
smother
yeah.
men and women with his ass.
So you can get a weird job while you're in prison.
Yeah.
And what he did is he'd read audiobooks, and I found one. There's
Weird.
there's like an audiobook for one of the novelizations of like the Star Wars anthology that is read by Ed Kemper.
Interesting.
It's so weird.
Wow. I feel like if that's the crossover of your interests, you should perhaps be on a list or something.
I would love
Star
to hear.
Wars and murder.
Ed Kemper.
Oh,
Just seems like a weird combo.
I don't know. There's an appeal to hearing someone with a violent history carefully describe what a Wookiee looks like. Like a dog, but far larger and with male-like lips.
There's another one. In 1977, Edward Alloway, believing that people were trying to hurt him, killed 7 people at Cal State Fullerton. 5 years earlier, he had been hospitalized for paranoid schizophrenia, but released without further treatment. So there's all these fucking schizophrenics running around who, because of this thing that Reagan did, are not in a fucking hospital because they were deinstitutionalized and it was made illegal to
Because they were secret
throw them
communists.
back
I
in
mean,
there.
it's even more than yes, there are a bunch of these serial killers, but it's way more common that all of these people just couldn't take care of themselves and ended up in jail because it's criminalized to be homeless. That's
Yeah.
0.0005% of these people are a danger to other people. It is rare. It is a thing,
Yeah.
and it's not offensive to say that mental illness can make you behave violently or a danger to yourself or others. But even more than that, it's just that these people cannot function, and if you can't function, you end up going to jail because because Reagan fucking cut all the systems that helped people who can't function.
Yeah, both of these things are really bad side effects of what could be fixed by just fucking, resetting up the fucking mental health
Having a
institutions.
chill house somewhere.
Pretty much.
Not to spoil the story too, but if you've ever been to Southern California, they never fix this.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean that where I grew up in Concord, New Hampshire, where the state mental hospital is. The New Hampshire State Mental Hospital is in my hometown.
We know it. We love it.
We know it. We love it. You've been there. Not to the
I have. I've
mental
seen it.
hospital, but
I pointed at the outside and I said, that looks like a good one.
it was right across the street from my high school, actually. But like when all this was happening, they drastically reduced the amount of inpatient care they had. They have this huge campus, and like the majority of it is now just like office buildings and stuff because they don't keep patients there even still. But in the 80s, it was even worse. And that's like when my parents moved there and when I was growing up and stuff. And my town that I grew up in was maybe 35,000 people. It's pretty small. And the amount of homeless people and like visibly mentally ill people who were just around all the time when I was growing up was like crazy disproportionate to the amount of people that live in the town. And there's actually a really good documentary that came out pretty recently called God Knows Where I Am, which is the story of this woman who was committed to the state hospital, and then she sort of demonstrated that she was competent enough to be in charge of her own care, but she really wasn't. Like she sort of managed to
Nice.
Yeah, like
I love when crazy people are able to like feign sanity somehow.
I immediately
Yeah.
relate.
so like she was basically like she was committed by her family and then demonstrated that she should be let out under her own volition.
Look,
and
I'm mailing a letter. Let me outside.
she like basically the way they describe it in this documentary is like her relatives are like, if they had talked to her for 5 more minutes, they would have been like, oh, this bitch is fucking crazy. Like
Yeah. It's, you know what I think I think I know why it makes me laugh so much, because it reminds me of when you're too high.
Yes.
Yeah, that is what it feels like. Yeah.
it's exactly like that. And like
You're like trying to buy something at a bodega, and
To
you're like,
prove you're cool.
just get through this one interaction.
and it's
I
the
know
sa-
how money works. Still, could I have a hamburger?
and it's the same thing where it's like even when they're in the mental hospital, like you can't force somebody to take medication if they're not sort of criminally ordered to be there.
Yeah.
Like they get to make those decisions unless there's they have like an executor of care or something like that. But so this woman basically proved that she didn't need that, and then they just let her out, and she ended up squatting in this abandoned house for a couple months until she starved to death. Like she died
Aw.
because she was crazy and she had these delusions, and she thought like this guy who she'd sort of imagined this relationship with was coming to get her.
Oh no.
Yeah, and she
I was hoping
died.
this would have a happier ending.
Sorry.
And now she's the mayor.
Yeah. No, well,
And
it's
that
just
woman is Elizabeth Warren.
if this stuff is like interesting to you.
She, the inventor of the purge.
Yeah, she invented the purge and became the president. If these sort of issues are interesting to you, because they are really complicated, like there isn't really a great answer for it. But yeah, it's a documentary called God Knows Where I Am. It's streaming on Netflix, and I drive by the house where it happened every time I go home, and it creeps me out.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry
Yeah.
for that long aside.
No, I'm glad.
I have like funny crazy person stories from childhood too, but I'll let you get through this before I get into them.
That's the thing, is like I was reading all this and I was like, man, what do we do here? Comedy podcast, but we got to take this shit seriously.
Yeah, we already got blown up for Dusty, a fake homeless person,
So yeah, somebody
in
got
his podcast.
right. Someone's gonna get mad at us all the time, but
True.
comedy podcast. I love everyone. Okay, but it's crazy. People are funny. There's gonna be something in here that's gonna be like really fucked up.
They're
and kinda
funny and we love them.
We love them and we want them to get the treatment that they need.
This is
Yeah.
a story from history about Reagan just like unleashing homeless people like zombies, like they up from the earth on America.
People who don't know where they are just being thrown out because the
Yeah.
president has a hole in his brain.
He's like
It's
a
not like-
necromancer.
But it's like it's not that homeless people are like zombies. It's that mentally ill people without care will eventually get put in prison because our fucking society is not set up to help anybody.
I have
so
a
it's
hard
just
time
them.
not being in prison normal.
Yeah. So something funny that happened is the California Department of Mental Health has this deputy director, and in 1973, as like in California, this is becoming sort of a public story. Where are all these homeless people coming from? Why is there this crime boom? Why are so many people in prison? He gives what it is described as among the all-time least successful attempts by a public official to reassure the public. Here's
That's a long record too.
Here's the quote. It has exposed us as a society to some dangerous people. No need to argue about that. People.
Look, we are letting murderers out of the mental institutions. That is not up for debate. However,
They're too confused to know not to do it again, so don't worry.
There's no need to argue about that. We're all on the same page here. People whom we have released have gone out and killed other people, maimed other people, destroyed property. They have done many things of an evil nature without their ability to stop many of them. Without their ability to stop, and many of them have immediately thereafter killed themselves. That sounds bad.
Despite being unwell, many are literate and have in fact signed the devil's book.
That sounds bad. But let's qualify it. The odds are still in society's favor, even if it doesn't make patients innocent or the guy who is hurt or killed feel any better. And then he just gives up and he leaves.
This just sounds like one of those long, meandering speeches at the end of an Aqua Teen Hunger Force episode where they try to extrapolate a lesson from whatever bullshit happened.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as we discussed in 1980, Reagan wins. He immediately dismantles all of Carter's shit, and the problem goes national, right? So, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. 40,000 beds in state mental hospitals are shut down over the course of the 80s. The National Institute of Mental Health has some statistics, but they don't seem to even know how many people are in any of these categories.
Yeah.
According to them, around 120,000 people are hospitalized. 381,000 mentally ill people are in nursing homes. An estimate of somewhere between 175,000 and 300,000 people are in those board-to-board care homes we talked about earlier, and 125,000 to 300,000 people are homeless. But they also just sort of qualify this by going, but we have no fucking idea. There's just lost track of all these people because they've been expunged from the system.
well, that's like, I mean, in that documentary, God Knows Where I Am, they talk about that, just like how easy it is for them to just sort of lose track of people once they are let out. You know, like it's.
Reagan had a system where he would send the Top Gun pilots out to fly over America and do a hand count.
Yes,
and that's how they got a lot of these numbers until they lost Goose.
It really was a blow to the whole program when they lost Goose.
So the problem,
Goose
obviously,
ironically had schizophrenia.
the problem hits New York City like really hard, right? I don't know, maybe the fucking craziest people go to New York to be the best of the craziest people or something.
That's right, baby.
You can be crazy here. You can be crazy anywhere.
One such story is of a secretary named Joyce Brown who had a job on what part of Manhattan is this? It's around East 65th and 2nd Avenue. She'd worked there for 10 years.
The Upper East Side?
I think so,
That's what I would call that.
And Warren Country.
Yeah.
Warren country, yeah.
She had become mentally ill, was hospitalized, and discharged. While living on the street, Brown was observed urinating on the sidewalk, defecating in the gutter, tearing up money that was given to her. So if you gave her money, she would just sort of like grin at you
Hell
and then
yeah.
tear it up.
This lady
That's actually
loves
great
the
punk
purge.
rock.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
She does not have a Patreon. You cannot support her.
She lived on top of a steam grate.
Dope.
And eventually, Mayor Ed Koch ordered her to be involuntarily hospitalized, well aware that the Civil Liberties Union's lawyers would contest the case.
Boo.
How am I doing? Koch's statement reflected the sentiments of many. He said, if the crazies want to sue me, they have every right to sue. And by
Yikes.
crazies, I'm talking about those who say, no, you have no right to intervene to help. See what he did there?
Whoa.
Makes you think.
He's really holding a mirror up to society.
And that's why
Ed
he
Koch.
has a bridge.
And that's why I live on that bridge. So the civil liberty lawyers prevailed, and a civil right to be both psychotic and homeless thus added another legal wrinkle to the ongoing homeless debate. So that civil liberties thing came back into it in like the national scale or whatever, where like he tried to help that woman, and they just said it's fucking illegal to throw her in jail.
Yeah. It's very complicated.
The goddamn Gipper made houses illegal. I don't know what to do now.
Sorry. So shit starts going crazy all over the country. There's this TV station in San Francisco that releases like a series, like a mini series on the problem. They put these ads all over town that say, "You are now walking through America's newest mental institution." They're just like in the town.
Yeah.
Whoa. Also holding a mirror up to society.
Yeah, a lot of mirrors here.
This is how the Insane Clown Posse started.
In 1984, there's this guy named George Wooten who's Denver's first person to be booked in jail 100 times.
Yay!
True heads,
Centennial
no.
Man.
Yeah, dude.
Congrats to him.
Probably got so high off that leafy green.
And so there's this problem in jails, and there's this very obvious thing that's happening that we talked about, which is they're just being funneled into jails, and there are people in jails that are being reported of like drowning themselves in toilets and shit.
Yeah.
There's one guy they found just covered in feces who tried to flush himself down the toilet.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that there are probably more than one person they found covered in feces during
Yeah.
all of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
go out on a limb.
Plumbers hate him.
There's a lot of crazy shit. Oh wait, let me pause real quick. I gotta look up this list. So, fucking insanity breaks out all over the country. Here's a list of a bunch of shit that happened. In 1985, Sylvia Segrist, diagnosed with schizophrenia and with 12 past hospitalizations, killed 3 and wounded 7 in a Pennsylvania shopping mall. Brian Stanley, diagnosed with schizophrenia and with 7 past hospitalizations, killed a priest and 2 others in a Wisconsin Catholic church. Lois Lang, diagnosed with schizophrenia and discharged from a mental hospital 3 months earlier, killed the chairman of a foreign exchange firm and his receptionist in New York. They're going to start getting weirder.
Cut this out, but Lois Lang is Chinese Superman's girlfriend.
Don't make me fucking edit shit. You said it. It's on the podcast.
It's too good.
Well, then why'd you say it on the podcast?
I had to tell my friends.
God damn it. I'm not taking it out.
No!
You're fucking canceled. 1986, Juan Gonzalez, diagnosed with schizophrenia and psychiatrically evaluated 4 days earlier, killed 2 and injured 9 others with a sword on the Staten Island ferry.
Yeah!
Yeah, dude.
He went for it.
You can drink on the ferry. You can do other stuff,
You can bring
apparently.
a sword on the ferry. That's what I learned today.
Yeah. In 1986, man. 1987, David Hassan, discharged 2 days earlier from a mental hospital, killed 4 people by running them over with his car. 1988, Lori Dan, who is known to both the police and the FBI because of her threatening and psychotic behavior, killed a boy and injured 5 of his classmates in an Illinois elementary school. Dorothy Montalvo, diagnosed with schizophrenia, was accused of murdering at least 7 elderly individuals and burying them in her backyard in California.
I don't know why I'm waiting like there's going to be a good one.
Yeah. How many of these are you going to do?
What's going to break the rule here?
Yeah.
No,
One of them is going to become the mayor.
there's one good one. It's the next one, and it's
Okay.
the last one. Actually, this is like a paragraph. There's a few of them in here. Aaron Lind, known to be mentally ill and threatening, killed the Dane County coroner in Madison, Wisconsin. That's pretty cool. He killed a coroner.
Who's going to autopsy the coroner,
Yeah.
folks?
Yeah. Makes
Think
you
about that.
Okay, blah, 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 blah. This was one of 6 incidents in that county during 1988 involving mentally ill individuals that resulted in 4 homicides, 3 suicides, 7 victims wounded by gunshots, and 1 victim mauled by a polar bear.
What?
A mentally ill man climbed into the pen at the local zoo.
And the polar bear had schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Schizophrenic polar bear.
So those are just some examples of like shit that happened in that span of the years in the early Reagan era, right? There's a few other high-profile shootings that happened. A politician named Howard Lowenstein was killed by a guy named Dennis Sweeney. Dennis Sweeney had schizophrenia and believed that Lowenstein, a former friend of his, had put a transmitter in his teeth that was talking to him.
Damn, not cool.
Bad friend.
Fake friends.
Fake friends. Can't trust them.
John Lennon is shot by Mark David Chapman, a guy who's really fucking crazy. There's also a last podcast on him.
You'd have to be crazy not to love the Beatles, folks. Am I right? Great music. One of the
Institutionalize them.
And then finally, 2 months into Reagan's presidency, he was shot by a guy named John Hinckley, who was diagnosed as schizophrenic. So
Pretty cool.
the ironic thing here is that Reagan didn't believe in schizophrenia.
Right.
So this guy tried to kill him because he was schizophrenic. The guy was hospitalized, and 2 years later, Reagan tried to contact him. He wanted to go to
make
the
amends.
hospital. He wanted to go like apologize to the guy and make good with him. And
apologize and be like, I'm sorry, schizophrenia is real?
I don't know. He wanted to do some Christian shit with him where he was like,
okay.
I think he wanted to forgive him. That's what it was.
What if he was like, I'm
shooting
not
me.
sorry, motherfucker?
If you were one of the boys on my football team in that one movie I did, I would have taught you better than this.
So Reagan,
He's not at the hospital yet. He's just talking to his car.
because he's crazy too. He doesn't
Right.
fucking believe in mental
And
illness.
he's the president?
So Reagan was shot by this guy who had schizophrenia, and they hospitalized him. And then 2 years later, he called the hospital and said he wanted to come to the hospital and forgive him. And the doctor on the phone had to like talk the president out of this. He was like, "This man is mentally ill, and he still wants to kill you."
Yeah, he's not going to hear your apology, man.
Yeah, and he was
You
so
put
funny.
a radio in his teeth? You probably don't remember.
And he like had an argument with the doctor where he was like, "No, that's not real. He was just having a bad day or something."
He loved communism too much, but he's better now.
Anyways, ironically, Reagan went fucking crazy and probably had no idea that he destroyed the entire country.
Truly, we are all stars now in the dope show.
Anyways, that's the end of the story. Reagan destroyed the mental health industry. Republicans don't actually like mental health shit. They don't like
They don't
Medicare.
give a fuck. They don't give a fuck.
The only thing they legitimately like is the purge, and they wish it was real.
Yeah.
And every chance they get, they try to make it happen.
They just it's all just leading to the purge. But yeah, it really is like I saw firsthand the dramatic effects that this deinstitutionalization had on my town. Like
Yeah.
it really was a huge thing. And granted, like I said, like yes, the vast majority of mentally ill people, people always bring this up, and it's true that mentally ill people are much more likely to be victims of a violent crime or abused than to abuse or commit violence. That doesn't mean that there are not violent mentally ill people that desperately need treatment, but like the way that I saw this happen in my hometown was just that like there were all of these people who lived on the street because they couldn't hold down a job and they couldn't do anything, and like in a lot of cases like couldn't afford medication, but in others had some kind of delusion that prevented them from taking it consistently, which is like very common.
That's why they need Billy Joel.
That's why they need Billy Joel to
the
come.
piano man.
He
And
just crashes his car into your house and he's like, "Take your medicine."
But most of them were they'd be like hanging out downtown, and everybody kind of knew them. And like when I was in high school, my friends, like everybody worked at like the retail stores downtown. That was like people's high school jobs. And so there would be like the known like crazy people who were like ejected from the mental hospital
Yeah.
who would come in, and like a lot of times most of my friends have cleaned up human shit. I've cleaned up human shit from like people shitting in an aisle at CVS on Main Street in Concord, New Hampshire, like
Sure.
very common. But my favorite guy was this guy who used to come into the bagel place where my friends worked.
The bagel boss.
The bagel,
boss
he's the
of
bagel boss.
Yes.
He's my friend.
He's my good friend.
He thought he owned the place.
So this guy would come in, and everybody called him Blind Deaf Jim, and
Cool.
he would come in and he would alternate. Sometimes he would say, "I'm sorry, can you count this change into my hand? I'm blind." He was clearly not blind.
Yeah.
Clearly not blind. And then occasionally he would come in.
You there in the hat. I'm blind.
And then occasionally he would come in and be deaf. He would come in and be deaf. And
Would he do the offensive voice? Because you can get canceled for that.
I don't remember. I think he would say that he was like partially deaf
Right.
or something. Like he'd be like, "Can you speak up?"
He was unwell. He wasn't Nick Mullen.
Yeah, exactly. But I just remember the iconic Blind Deaf Jim story is that one time he came into the bagel place and my friend Chris was working, and Chris was talking to my other friend, and he went, "Hey, it's Blind Deaf Jim," and Blind Deaf Jim went, "I heard that."
He's in on it. I
Yeah.
hope he's listening now.
He
is
is
listening.
great.
Hey, it's Blind Deaf Jim. He's got headphones in and he's listening to a podcast.
You know he's really lost it because he comments on our SoundCloud.
He's really unhinged.
Hold on. Mandatory communist propaganda point. The reason that we don't care for any of these mentally unwell people is because capitalism has no way to extract value from their labor, and so they're worse than useless to us, and we throw them on the street and wait for them to die.
Yeah.
Correct. That is correct, my
Like
friend.
and subscribe.
What's funny about that is that capitalism has tried in Austin during South by Southwest a few years ago, and honestly, like every few years they try this. There was like a thing where they were going to put like charging stations on homeless people.
They
or
did
something.
it. They put.
Oh, wait, I remember this.
They had them wear like Wi-Fi routers, and you could like tip them or whatever. But they were just hired
My lady.
to stand there. And like again, Jake and I are from Austin. Like Austin has a huge homelessness problem, partially because of this like that
Because of the
healthcare-
Wi-Fi industry.
because everyone has that fake disease where they're electromagnetically sensitive, and it's
Yeah,
making
yeah,
them go
yeah.
insane because of all the Wi-Fi.
All the Jill Stein crystals out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
There's a
healthcare
radio
in
in
Texas
every one
is
of my
so bad, and like it's all these crazy people downtown. But yeah, they've tried, and the other way they try to extract value is to put them in private mental health institutions and get government contracts and get paid per head.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a damn shame.
I'm here to say, not cool.
that ain't it, Chief.
It's not it.
Not
Chief.
not yeet, not on fleek. 30 to 40 homeless hogs. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, they are.
The hogs are homeless. They're feral.
Yeah.
And that really ties the whole thing together, doesn't it?
Yeah. There are 30 to 40 million
When you-
feral humans on my yard, which is America. Our yard.
Within 200 to 250 years.
Put the hogs in a home.
Home the hogs. You know how we solve hog homelessness? We give them homes.
Yes.
Yeah.
A
just-
home for every hog.
Not just the teacup pigs, but even the full daddy swines. They're still cuddly, they're still thick, and they got human-like appendages.
All right. Well, that's about all I can stand to podcast this week. Anybody want to plug anything?
When is this coming out?
Soon, probably.
Probably like tomorrow.
I don't know why I asked. I don't know what I have to plug. Check my Twitter, Kath Barbadoro.
Listen to all Kath's fucking podcasts.
Yeah. So
Podcast.
I have, if you like pro wrestling, I don't do it anymore, but I have a wonderful back catalog of Wrestlesplania. If you like pro wrestling, that's
You're
my pro wrestling
plugging a
podcast.
back catalog right now.
I'm starting with that, and then I have What a Time to Be Alive, which is all about hogs, and Lie, Cheat, and Steal, which is about fraud and stuff. So check those out.
Yep. Bad News, it's a comedy show on Sundays in Brooklyn, New York, 7 p.m., Cherry Tree Bar and Grill. No grill, just bar. Come do it. It's good.
What the fuck do I have right now? I'm going on tour with Sarah June. We're going
Hey, I love her.
Hey!
Hey, Sarah June.
Symbol of white supremacy.
No one saw you do the hand gesture,
Yeah, I know.
so it just sounded like you said Sarah June, symbol of white supremacy.
Well, hopefully they heard the first 50 minutes of the podcast. I
our,
don't know what to tell you.
our Iranian friend Sarah June is a symbol of white supremacy.
Born in 1988.
I don't know when she was born.
She's younger than me, but she's still a symbol of white supremacy.
We're going on me and a symbol of white supremacy are going on tour from Mexico up to Seattle, and then I'm going with Mishka Shubali back down to Texas. And
Colonizing the coasts.
I don't think I have anything big to plug other than that. But if I do, it'll be on Twitter. Patreon. Sign up for our Patreon. Give us money because we're dying. We're gonna die in the purge.
Please, there are so many feral hogs.
We need feral hog repellent, please.
They all nest in Jake's home.
Yeah. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
It's finished.